Sup everybody, it's Lisa D again. I was just talking to my girl Haley. We were talking about how these scientists took the DNA of a fish that lives in like the North Pole or something and put it into a tomato plant. That way, the tomato could make its own natural antifreeze, the same kind that the fish makes. That way the tomato won't die off in the winter. That's crazy, right? Do y'all want to know how that's possible? Well, it's all because DNA has the information for making the traits of all living things. The fish's DNA ladder is the same as the tomato's DNA ladder. So let's talk about what this stuff is. What does DNA stand for? DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Deoxyribonucleic acid. You remember hearing about nucleic acids, right? Yeah, one of the big 4 biomolecules. Okay, here's the DNA ladder. We've all seen this before. You might even remember that since DNA is a nucleic acid, it's made up of the nucleotide building blocks. One DNA ladder is made of, trillions of nucleotides. Now, don't lose me here. Remember, all we're talking about are the building blocks that make up the DNA twisted ladder that we've all seen before. You could also say that DNA shape is a double helix. Sounds kind of cool, right? Anyway, let's take a closer look at these nucleotides. All right, so this picture shows us a red and yellowy version of a nucleotide. Each nucleotide has 3 parts. This tiny circle part here, that's the phosphate. The phosphate group just connects one nucleotide to the next. To me, that's all a phosphate group really is, like a connector. Now see this red pentagon? This red pentagon is a sugar called deoxyribose. To me, it's the center of the nucleotide. So now you have the center and the connecting part of the nucleotide. Some people call this the phosphate sugar backbone. But I think we can agree that DNA looks more like a ladder, right? So they're kind of like the phosphate sugar sides. Yeah, we should call them the phosphate sugar ladder side thingies. I don't know. Anyway, let's take a closer look at the steps of the ladder. Now the steps of the ladder are the nitrogen bases. To me, the most important part of the ladder. It's the sequence of the nitrogen bases that make up the code. But how? That's what Haley and I were talking about. Well, there's 4 different bases, A, T, C, and G, which stand for adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. But that's not going to be on the test of life, y'all, thankfully. Let's look at this ladder again. The bases of side 1 of the ladder stick to the bases on side 2 of the ladder. See? It's like the nitrogen bases are the steps of the ladder, and the phosphate and sugars are the sides of the ladder. Remember that. Now, let's pump the brakes again, folks. Big picture time. All we're talking about are the subunits, the building blocks of the DNA twisted ladder, okay? You might see them like this, or like this, or like this, or even like this. But remember, it doesn't really matter how you're looking at it because the most important part are their nitrogen bases, the steps of the ladder. So like I was saying, the bases stick together, but they stick together in a specific way. Let's go back to that black and white picture. Do you see what's happening? The A's are attached to the T's, and the G's are bonded with the C's. Those are the rules for how these bases pair up. Let's take a closer look at that. All right, take a look. A-T. At. That makes a word, right? C-G. Doesn't make a word. That's an easy way to remember. A goes with T, C goes with G. At. Now, this means that for every T, there's going to also be an A. So if this DNA ladder has like 57,000 G's, there's also going to be 57,000 C's. Cool? So let's take a look at this ladder again. What we're going to do is we're going to fill in the missing parts of the DNA ladder, and then we're going to call it a day. What do y'all say, okay? Now, this is not an art class, so no haters. So here are the sides of the ladder, side 1 and side 2. Now, what are the sides made up of again? That's right, the sugars and the phosphates. Great. Now let's look at the steps of the ladder, the nitrogen bases. A lot of times, I've seen them look like puzzle pieces that fit together, so that's how I've drawn them. Again, no haters. So, if I just give you a T up top here, and a G right here, we can fill in the rest of this DNA ladder. So, first things first, what's going to go with this T up top? Do you remember? Right, an A. So let's fill in an A right here. And now we know that the corresponding blue base down here is also an A. Let's write that. All right, now what's going to go with this G word, C's? So let's fill in our C's right here. And now we just have 2 left. Do you know what goes in the last 2? You got it. We've got a G here and a T here. And we're done. We've just filled in a DNA ladder. Amazing. All right, guys. Well, that's what DNA is made of. And what's cool is that my A's, T's, C's, and G's are the same as your A's, T's, C's, and G's. Amazing, right? And that fish in that tomato plant that Haley and I were talking about, well, the nucleotides of the fish are the same as the nucleotides of the tomato plant. Trippy, right? DNA is universal. But how does it work? Well, guys, that's a question for next time. Until then, this is Lisa D.